I have to have a little assistance here. Are you worried about the mic? Okay, good. I got drop foot. Don't get it. Yeah, that's good. I can stare at that ball all night. Y'all nervous? My name's Danny. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, glad to be here. I'm from the Cypress Wood group in Spring, Texas, and some of my old home group people are here tonight, Kyle and Bobby, and their friends who I've been introduced to several times, and I still can't remember their names, but they're great people, and I'm glad they're here. I've met a whole bunch of people who I've met before, and I didn't know any of them except John and Gail. Everybody else is even Bob was a surprise to me. But, I'm a little intimidated to be up here, actually. You know, yeah, it's okay. I'll get over it. I didn't say I wasn't going to talk. I just said I was a little intimidated. But yeah, I'm really glad to be here. I usually, I'll quit doing that. I'm shaking the deal. Is that good? It sounds like I'm nervous. It's warm up here. You're not going to fix that, are you? No. So I usually start my talk off with a joke because it usually calms me down and makes me feel, that there's something worth saying. But I'm not going to tell it tonight because I've told it over and over again, and I know everybody's sick of it. So I'll just go right into I'll tell it just this one more time for you. So a lady walks into a pharmacy. And she goes into the pharmacy, and she goes up to the pharmacist and said, I'd like to buy some arsenic. And he said, well, what for? She said, I'm going to kill my husband. He said, ma'am, you can't walk in here and say something like that. They'll put both of us in jail. And she reached into her purse and pulled out a picture of his wife and her husband in bed together and handed it to him. And he said, well, now that's different. I didn't know you had a prescription. Yeah. And Al-Anon stole that joke from me, and he really likes it. I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to be here with a bunch of new friends and old friends, and I can't believe I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous this long. I had no idea that I was going to be here. My gift of sobriety is February the 18th of 81, and which is 10 months longer than John A., who's my old roommate and dear friend. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a been around date. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous sometime in the fall of 1979. And I liked AA, but I didn't really want to not drink. I didn't really intend to stay. My life wasn't going too well. I was riding around drunk that morning with my wife. We were arguing about, marital things, like her boyfriend. And I was irritated because I thought this is going to ruin our marriage. And we had been at it for a while, and she just stopped in front of this nondescript looking building and just kicked me out of the car. So when she drove off, this was before cell phones. We couldn't just dial a friend. And so I went into this building to see if I could use the phone to call a friend to come get me and save my marriage. And I didn't know that was AA. I walked up there and opened the door up, and there were people sitting over the corner playing cards, smoking cigarettes, and they saw me. They were very happy to see me. And they invited me in. I kept trying to ask to use the phone, and they kept saying things to me like, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. And I thought, I think you're right. I'm not sure where you're going with that. I just kind of want to use the phone. And they asked me to stay. They said, if you'll stay till the meeting's over, we'll give you a ride. So I thought, well, okay. So I waited for a long time for the meeting to start, and then they had it, and it's a call-up meeting. They'd call on Ralph, and he'd come up and say some horrible things about himself. Everybody'd clap and go sit down. And I thought, what a strange place this is. And it just kept on like that. And they said it was an hour-long meeting, but it seemed a lot longer than that because I was starting to sober up a little bit. And The thing with me, all my life that I can remember, is whenever I got in any kind of social situation that felt awkward to me, which was nearly everywhere I went, my head would start racing, my gut would tighten up, and my foot would start patting, and I had this mantra. I was like, I got to go. I got to go. I don't know where I got to go, and I don't know why I got to go, but I got to get out of here. And that's starting to happen to me. And I'm like, I got to go. And all of a sudden, they all stood up, held hands, and said the Lord's Prayer. And then that place just erupted into laughter, everybody talking at the same time. It was during the smoking days of AA, and really all you could see clearly out there was legs. And, and I'm looking for a way out, and there's a back door out the kitchen at the 710 Club in Midland, Texas. And I'm backing out that way, and all of a sudden that place parted like the Red Sea, and here came two guys heading for me, a little dour-looking fellow with a flat top and a young guy with him. I saw him coming, and I thought, oh, hell no, I ain't going anywhere with him. And he walked up to me, and he said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going to Baskin-Robbins for ice cream. Would you like to go? And I thought, Baskin-Robbins for ice cream. Be still my beating heart. There is no way on God's green earth I'm going off with a bunch of geriatrics for ice cream while my wife is out with her boyfriend. That ain't happening. But what came out of my mouth was, sure, I'd love to go. So I wound up over at Baskin-Robbins holding a melting Rocky Road ice cream while they tried to pitch me on Alcoholics Anonymous. And I like to get to the point. I don't have time for long conversations. I don't want to hear your whole story. I'm sorry you had a hard time in life, but do you think I'm alcoholic? And they would invariably start talking about themselves. And you think, I know, how do you get through to these people? I don't have a lot of time here. I've got hot checks out everywhere. My parole officer, I haven't seen my parole officer in months because I don't have anything good to report. I'm living in a stolen car. I wear an eye patch over a perfectly good eye. My wife is out living with her boyfriend. I do not have time to listen to your story of woe. But that's what you do every time. No one will tell you what you are. You kind of self-diagnose here. I thought that was probably the most pointless evening of my life, but really what had happened is I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous and I ultimately got a cup of coffee and a brand new life. And I'm going to tell you, I love AA. I don't know about you. It said our troubles are basically of our own making. Well, I'm going through some troubles that are basically of her making. And I know at some point they were of mine, but I talked to my sponsor yesterday. And I started to tell him stuff, and he said, Danny, you're an AA guy. Embrace that. And I thought, that's damn sure right. That's what we are. An old friend, Don Major, just passed away, and he wrote a meditation book, and I love the title, Stumbling in the Right Direction. And I thought, I've been using that. I think that's exactly what we do. We know which way we're headed, and we're not going along. Anyway, that was my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it didn't take. I used that, though, because I would come back regularly and get desired chips and get 30 days, and my life was a wreck, But I always called it my been around day, because, after you've been here a little bit, and if you slip a lot, the old-timers, when you walk in, they'll see you, say, how long have you been sober? And, it always puts you on the spot like that. And, I'd say, well, I've been sober 29 days this time, but I've been around since, 1979. I didn't want you to think just because I was drinking, I didn't know what we were doing here. I mean, I'd memorized the third step prayer, and had several sponsors. I've had a sponsor until he said something I disagreed with, which was just about everything they said. I'll tell you a little bit about how I wound up in that unfortunate situation. My mother and dad were born. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But my mother and daddy were married February the 14th, which was Valentine's Day, 1944. They had me a year later, and my dad went off and fought in the Second World War. My mom raised me. She was 15 years old. We lived down in South Texas, and when my dad came back from the service, he was pretty twisted up. but he could take a drink and it'd just light him up, and he was so much fun. And he got to coming in from work and getting me and taking me to the bars with him while my mom stayed home and cleaned house or whatever she did. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to go to the bars and run around out there, get my little drink, and it was fun. But my mom finally decided that she's going to have to do something about that, and she told my dad if he didn't straighten up that she's going to take me and leave. And he didn't want to lose his family, so he put the plug in the jug, and overnight he became this angry, withdrawn, hard-working man. And where I had been the apple of his eye, went with him everywhere. It was always a lot of fun. I have a memory of him when I was a kid, him holding me out in the backyard, big, handsome man, and he was holding me with my head to his bare chest and patting my head, and me feeling on a very visceral level that I'm safe. I'm with my dad. Nothing can harm me. And here we are just weeks later, and he's the guy that's screaming at me for everything I do, and he's withdrawn out in the corner. Now, you don't know what went wrong. I don't blame my alcoholism on that, but that's just some of the things that added to my life. I fast forward. I grew up alone. I have 2 younger brothers, but I was almost already in middle school when they were born. So I kind of grew up on my own. I made up my own friends like we do. And I'm just alone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what you say. My dad didn't know. He didn't teach me anything. My mom just said, "Don't do that." So I just walked around not doing stuff. And I got to middle school. By the time I got to middle school, I was a pretty twisted up kid. We watched a film called Duck and Cover. That's for the older people. You'll remember that's what they used to show us in the 50s, what to do in case the nuclear bomb goes off in your neighborhood. And you get your biggest book, you out in the hallway, you duck down and put it over your head. Look, I wasn't their best student, and I knew that was woefully inadequate. And I came out of that thing, and I was like, I got to go. And so I started running away from home, and they finally got me, and they put me in Big Spring State Hospital, the one that Clancy made famous. And I stayed in there for my first 30 days, got out, came back home, and eventually I stole my mother's car, went to hang out with some of the cool kids. And I dressed up just like they do, because you don't know what they do, but you got to look like them. So I dressed up like them. I got a white T-shirt, and I got cigarettes rolled up in my sleeve. And the problem is I don't smoke, and my dad's cigarettes, and my arms are skinny, so my cigarettes keep unrolling, and I'm driving my mother's Ford station wagon. It's without permission, so I'm not having a good time. And I get down there, and there's all the football boys and girls, and they've got these lowered 57 Chevys, and they're just, everybody's having a great time, and I'm like, I got to go. But a guy saw me, he came over, and he invited me over, and, asked me my name, and the first thing you know, I'm smoking a cigarette, and I'm choking on it, and he offered me a drink out of, they had a big Coke jug, like Coke syrup comes in. He poured me some beer, and I took a few drinks, and nothing really happened. Then it took a few more, and something must have happened, because I became very loquacious. I had opinions about everything. I knew stuff I didn't know how I knew. I was very approachable. I wasn't intimidated by anything. It was like the most wonderful evening of my life. A few things went wrong. I puked on myself, I wrecked my mother's car, and I wound up in juvenile detention. But outside of that, it was a perfect evening. My folks thought that I got out of the hospital a little early, and so they immediately recommitted me, and I escaped. They caught me and brought me back and said, "If you do that again, we'll give you shock treatments." So I'm biding my time one day, and we're walking from the ward over to the cafeteria, and as we're walking over, here's a lady had left her car unlocked with the keys in it. I mean, is that odd or is that God? And so I have 2 friends that I've made that were getting shock treatments. I grabbed these 2 guys, and we jumped in the car, and we took off. We headed for Midland, which was about 38 miles away. We got to Midland, and we picked up 2 more boys who should have been in that hospital. And this is my first gang. I'm their leader. And I have a plan. Now, I'm the guy that will shoot arrows into the wall and then paint bullseyes around them and back up and congratulate myself on being a good shot. So I've got a plan. We're going to Mexico. It's going to solve everything. So we're heading south. We have no money, so we would go in and to little mom and pop places and siphon gas and steal booze and bread and what have you. And the further we got down our trip, those boys' meds began to wear off, and it became clear they were in that hospital for a reason. It became increasingly more difficult with every stop for me to gather my gang up and get them back in the car. But we got across the border into Mexico, and I sold that car to a taxi driver for a few hundred pesos, which I thought was a lot of money. And so we're over in the Cadillac bar in Villacuña, and we're having a drink, and this is when I realized I'm pretty much out of plan. And all of a sudden there was this big fight, and what happened, one of the guys that I brought with me had killed a parrot that belonged to a lady that worked down there. And it started a hell of a fight. And here came the federales and the local police, and I grabbed these guys and said, we've got to get out of here. And we ran for the international border, and they caught us on the Mexican side, and we went to jail in Mexico. That's what I said. In the doctor's opinion, it says that the alcoholic's problem piles up on him, become astonishingly difficult to solve. And this is one of those instances that bore that truth out. Because I'm not bilingual, I didn't know how to tell these people I want my mother. So I wound up in jail in Mexico. I stayed there for an extended time. My mother eventually finds me. She gets me out. She doesn't get them out because she thinks they're my problem. And I agree. And we get back, and all the way back from the border to Midland, Texas, which is about 240 miles, she plays Mexican music on this radio and turns it up real loud and quotes scripture to me. And it was her attempt at aversion therapy. And it worked. I still hate that music, you know. But we got back, and I'm about to turn 17, and they have a family meeting. That's where you sit there and they talk. And my dad said, well, I think he should join the Navy. They'll make a man out of him. And I wanted to say, I have a bulletin for you. I'm an escaped mental patient. But the Navy evidently had very low standards. And the day I turned 17, I joined the Navy. And I liked the Navy. I grew big and strong. We all wore the same clothes. I looked like everybody else, and we all learned the same march. So, you know, this is good. I can do this. And I became a CB, and we island hopped around the South Pacific, and I was a two-fisted drinker. I just could drink anybody under the table, and I had a great time. I was really enjoying myself. But something happened where I started having real problems. Like, I would not know that everybody else went home, and I was still going somewhere. I would black out. I'm very emotional. Sometimes I'm having a great time. Sometimes I'm crying. Sometimes I want to fight. And I can't keep it together, so I'm starting to change what I drink. I can't drink tequila anymore because I behave very poorly. And I try to drink just beer, but that's, you spend all your time in the restroom, so you just go back to tequila. And so I'm starting to withdraw from everybody because I see that everybody else gets drunk and has a good time, but they get it together the next day. They go to work, they sweat it out, and I usually don't. I wind up in the brig. And so, I feel sorry for myself. I'm a loner. I try to stay away from booze, but I can't stand being sober. I don't know that. I don't understand that. I just know that I got to go. Is on my plan, and you're on a little island in the Navy. You ain't going anywhere, so I'm going to the bar. And it culminated in Guam. I got drunk with some British sailors, and when they closed the club, they invited me to their ship, apparently. And back then they had liquor rations aboard the British ships, and so they invited me. Apparently, we got past the officer of the day and got on their ship because I came to. They had steamed out, and I was still on board the ship. And so, this really created a problem because they have everybody come out and stand up and do a muster, and they had too many sailors. And it was pretty clear who wasn't British, and they got a launch come out from the shore patrol, come out and got me and brought me back, and I'm humiliated. I didn't set out for that to happen. That wasn't going to be the way it was for me. I was going to stay in the Navy, and I was going to become a chief petty officer, make a career. I was going to make my dad proud. But here I am just doing this, I'm going down, and I don't know why. And I just hate everybody. And Cease Corrigal used to say, he said he just wrapped his anger and his self-pity around him like a warm coat and blamed the world. And that's what I did. I got back to the States. I tried to keep it together, but one night I got drunk and I thought I needed to go to Texas. And you really have to work that out with the government before you do. And so they brought me back as AWOL. And they brought me back, and I attempted suicide. And that's when they did a little discovery, and they found out they had a escaped mental patient for a sailor. And so they offered me a deal and gave me a general discharge under honorable conditions. They let me out, and I went straight to Skid Row in Los Angeles. And I lived on the streets of Los Angeles for several months. I learned to lie, cheat, and steal. I learned living in missions, and you learn the difference between selling blood and selling plasma. You just learn how to hustle. How do you live with nothing? And I called my mom, and back those days, the only way you get money fast was to get a Western Union wire. And I'd be down there near that bus station. I'd call my mom, collect, and give her a story that she believed, and I did too. I'll just get me out of here. I'll come home, and I'm going to straighten up. I've learned my lesson. And she would send me money, and I'd be so relieved I'd have to have a drink. And then the money's gone, and I'm still here. And that's over and over again. Obviously, I eventually got out of there. And I got back down to Texas and went to work. My dad had an electrical company. I worked for him for a little while, but he fired me because I was an entitled drunk, and I was just a troublemaker. And so he fired me, and I started hanging out at a bar that was known for its rowdy crew. And I met some guys that they drove nice cars, and they drank Crown Royal. Back then we had BYOB. You didn't have mixed drinks in Texas, and they drank Crown Royal and had pills, and had guns and girlfriends, and I really liked them. I wanted to be like them. And they were needing some help, and I interviewed for the job, and I got it. And pretty soon, I got a gun, a girlfriend, a car. I drink Crown Royal, and I think, well, everybody's got to be something. I'm a gangster, and I'm good with that. It lasted about 6 months, and we got arrested. And everybody went to prison but me. I got a probation. They said, if you'll just pay back the money, live down this, if you pay back the money, you hold down a job, don't drink, don't hang out in those places, this will be expunged from your record. It'll be a tough lesson, but you can get on with your life. And in jail, prayerfully, I wanted that more than anything. I've told my folks, I really get it this time. I understand that I can't do this anymore. I got out, I got a job that lasted about 3 weeks. I was pumping gas. And one day I'm pumping gas, and this guy's standing there, he's a little bald-headed guy smoking a cigar, and I thought he can pump his own damn gas. And I just left the nozzle running in his car, and I went into the cash register, made a cash advance, went across the street to a bar. I took a drink. I was 300 miles away in Dallas. And I did what I do, I found some more guys, and pretty soon they're looking for me everywhere. They've got my picture up in places they shouldn't be. My dad, he's humiliated. He's like that salt of the earth guy. For all of his faults, he didn't lie, cheat, or steal. He worked hard, and his reputation meant everything to him. And I had been his number one son, the apple of his eye. And at this point, they're asking him, "Where's Danny?" And he'd say, "Danny who?" and turn around and walk off. And my mom was humiliated, and my brothers were afraid. And they finally caught me, and they gave me 13 5-year sentences and sent me off to Texas Department of Corrections. And what I can tell you about doing time in Texas in the 60s, that it's very time-consuming. And, you just don't have a lot to do, and you may have to go, but you ain't. And I did my time, wrote my mom. And we this time we're sober, and she's sober, and we're finding the Lord, and it's different, and she can see that I mean it, and I do, and I mean it with all my heart. I'm never ever drinking whiskey again, except on special occasions. It turns out getting out of prison is a very special occasion. My mom came to get me, and she was in a great mood. I was in a great mood. I had no knowledge of myself as an alcoholic. I hadn't had a drink in 3 years. And I got out and I bought a little half pint of whiskey and got in the car, and we're in the best mood. And I took a couple of pops off that and I hit that sweet spot. And we're having a great time creating a life in front of us. And I'm excited. Stop everywhere you get the gas. I want to get out and talk to everybody, just having a good time. On the way in, my mom said, "Son, what you need is a wife, a kid, a car, a bank account, a job, and a house. You'll be okay." So we got to Midland. I went looking for a woman that had kids, a car, a bank account, a job, and a house. And I found her, and my mother was wrong. That was the worst 2 weeks of my life. I left that woman, and I started hanging out in the bar downtown Odessa. And a gal come in one day, and she was crying. She's a pretty girl. I'm very compassionate. I go over to talk to her. And it turns out that she's pregnant, and she can't go home because her folks won't let her come home as an unwed mother. And I felt bad for me because I didn't have a home to go to. And so we hatched the plan that we would get married. And so in Texas, you got to wait 3 days because they won't be sure that you love each other. And so we went and got our marriage license, and we just drank and partied, celebrating our nuptials. And we went over to the courthouse. We were knee walking drunk, and they married us anyway. Went out and found the first payphone I could and called my mother collect. Said, "Mom, I'm married." And she said, "I know." I said, "I don't know how you could. I just did it." And she said, "Oh my God, Danny, you have a wife." I was like, details. I'm always getting tripped up with details. But I thought it through, and I came up with a plan. We got on the bus, and we just took this 400-mile trip to McAlester, Oklahoma. In McAlester, Oklahoma, my new father-in-law picked us up in a chauffeur-driven limousine, and he was a very influential man. It turns out I had married the warden of McAlester Penitentiary's daughter. Well, I was very uncomfortable in that relationship. So I absconded, which means to move in a secret way. And I went back to West Texas. My mother arranged a divorce and an annulment, and now I'm in love, but I don't know who with. And I meet a little girl, and the moment we saw each other, we were deeply in love. It was like that instant, "I love you," and she loves me. You don't usually find that kind of love at that depth until you get to a treatment center, But I've always been precocious, so there I was. And for the next 3 years, I went downhill, and we were both drunks, and it got ugly, and I got abusive, and I'm not proud of that. And finally, she had to get away from me to save herself. And while she was gone, she was killed in a car wreck. And I didn't know what to do with that. And I tell you, it wasn't until I got to AA that I realized that actually it was pointed out to me that I never once thought about the loss of her life at 26 years old. I never thought about her family, about a life. I thought, why does this all happen to me? Pour me a drink. And so what did I do? I got a gun, a bottle of whiskey, went on a crime spree, and I got 10 years in prison. So I'm right back where I started. And this time I know for sure this is it. This time it's over. I need an education. My problem is I'm a gangster, and I'm also I'm not all there in the head. I've been to mental institutions, so I'm crazy. So I studied psychology, and I studied all kinds of things. And it turned out I was a pretty good student. I got a degree, and I'm smart, and I'm writing my mom, and she believes me, and I do too. And I get out, and life is good for a couple of weeks. And then I realized, I don't have a wife. So I go looking for her, and I found her. She was dancing on top of a table. And I knew when I saw her that was her. And she's the gal that kicked me out of the car in front of that club. And I wasn't looking for sobriety. I've just spent my whole life looking for a way out of whatever it was that I was dealing with. I spent my whole life trying to figure out how in the hell do you work out with everybody and make this all fit. How does this work? What do you do? How do you get from living on the streets to just being able to wait a whole week for your paycheck? How do you get to a place where you're just standing on the corner with no clothes, nowhere to go, nobody to call, and they say all you need is a job, and you got to wait 2 weeks, and you got to dress, and you got to sleep, you got to eat, and you can't do it, so you do day labor. In fact, you can't do that because you're drunk. So what do? You steal. You lay on the streets. And how do you get from that to where we're at? I don't know how you did it. I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. Quite in my mind by accident, I was almost certain it was a divine appointment. And I started running, and I was running from my life when I met you. And, of course, you knew that. And I'm running between Midland, Dallas, and Austin. I'm in that old car. It's an old beat-up, terrible car. I stole it. The guy didn't even want it back, you know. And and I'm running everywhere, and I finally land down in Austin, Texas, and I'm hanging out down in Austin, Texas. And one day I've been going to these meetings, and you know, I see this guy I like. I want to get to know him, but I'm intimidated. He's just a young guy he seems to have it together. He drives a nice truck. He's got a blonde girlfriend. He's got a job, and he speaks up in AA, and people listen. And I thought I like to be like that. And I went to a meeting one day in that group, and it just was a horrible meeting. Same old people talk, same crap. And I got out of there, and I thought, I ain't coming back to AA. And I got in my car, and I thought, I needed some cigarettes. And I had a carton of cigarettes in the back seat. But I drove to a service station that sold beer. I walked in. I came out with a 6-pack of beer, and I said, if you don't want me to drink, stop me, if there is a God. And I started drinking. A week and a half later, I'm leaning out of that car, and I'm puking blood and bile. And I'm in the darkest place I've ever been in my life. And that madness won't go away. I don't know what to do with myself, and I know I'm about to go back to prison for the rest of my life or die on these streets. And I said, God, I'll do anything if I could just get sober. And apparently I got a hold of that guy, because he came. It wasn't the first time he came to get me either. He'd come to get me several times. I love gathering up a bunch of people and getting emotional in front of them. It's just one of my favorite things to do. I hate to cry alone, you know. But he come to pick me up. Him and that young guy. And I brought him back, and on the way back to the club, he said, I said, John, what am I going to do? He said, Danny, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. I said, how do you do that? He said, well, don't drink right now. And then when it's right now again, don't drink then either. And that kid said, yeah, pretty soon you'll have a minute. And John Henry said, you don't listen to him. He said, in Alcoholics Anonymous, like it was read earlier here, he said, the minutes become hours. They become days, weeks, months, years. You join us in this thing we do, and you'll find yourself a sober, self-respecting member of Alcoholics Anonymous with a host of friends and a relationship with the power that runs this universe. And I'm telling you, drunk on the way to the club, I was smitten with a magnificent obsession for sobriety. I wanted to be with you and like you more than anything else in the world. And I started going to those meetings. Instead of going into meetings and being disruptive and having something smart to say to everybody, instead of stealing out of the basket and hitting on the girls and being that guy that just, you know, I know everybody was thinking, oh, we want him to get sober, but does he have to do it in our group? You know? But I'm in there, all of a sudden I'm in there, I'm early. I sleep out there in that parking lot. When they open it up, I go in and help set up, and I clean up, and I keep my mouth shut, and I listen. And pretty soon one of those old guys said, you're doing good, kid. And he gave me a big box of CDs, and not CDs, they were cassettes, and a little battery-powered player, and I'd ride around that car, and I'd listen to those tapes, and laugh, and I'd cry. And I remember hearing one of them say, let go and let God. And I thought, let go and let God do what? And it really was a conundrum to me. So I thought, well, John Henry will know. So I drove back up to that club, and I'm getting out of that car, and I'm walking up to that club, and there's John Henry. And I looked at him, and I said, John Henry, I'm alcoholic. He said, yeah, you are. He said, come on in this house. Come on in this house. And I came in, and he took me back in the corner, and he told me about himself, and I listened. And his life wasn't like I thought it was. He was a lot like me, and he was successful. And he got me to open up, and he got me to talk about things. And he told me, he said, Danny, there's a lot of people that you'll run into that they seem to be able to just come to the meetings, and their life seems to be better. He said, they say it is. He said, but there's others like you that just won't happen for. He said, you have to be different in order to stay. You can't do it the way you are right now. You are absolutely screwed. And I knew that. I said, well, how's that going to happen? He said, we have a process, and if you'll do this, you promise me right now that you're willing to go to any length to have this gift. I'll stick with you, and we'll make this happen. But you got to do your part. And I told him I wouldn't. I got out on my knees, and I said the third step prayer. And I wrote an inventory, and I shared it. And I had this massive experience with God. And I just, when it happened, it was like, this is it. I'm going to go back to that club and start chairing all the meetings, straighten out all those old timers who they never did get it. And I'm on fire, man. My life is, and I know I got problems, and I understand that there's more to the program than having that, but you don't understand. See, you just caused a little trouble. Mine's a little worse than that, and we can't be going around apologizing to everybody for it. So I'm just going to live underground in AA and 12-step people. So I stay by that phone that people call. You can bet I'm on my way. I got the book. I get another guy. We go get you. We bring you back whether you want to come or not. And I'm loving AA. I'm in every meeting, and I'm just, man, this is it. The best I've ever been. I'm going to live underground here in Austin. About 6 months, I started to have that thing come back, and my gut's knotting up, and my head's running, and I can't take it. I can't stay. And I said, I got to go. I called John, and I said, John, I'm leaving. He said, meet me down at the club. I met him down at the club, and he said, Danny, he said, what's standing between you and that God you experienced are the things that are on your 8-step list? I said, well, there's some things I didn't tell you. He said, what are they? I said, well, I live in a stolen car. He said, well, now that's a problem. And he said, there was a bank robbery in San Angelo, Texas in the summer of 1980. And they're looking for me. They've been everywhere, and I was in the area. I'm a blackout drinker. I have no knowledge of this at all, but they want me. And he said, well, son, you got to go in and clean that up. I said, oh, no. He said, you told me when we started this you were willing to go to any length to have this gift. I said, that's theory. This is very serious. They will lock me up for the rest of my life. He said, well, get another sponsor, son, because you will not make it with that. And he drove off, and I went out and sat in that car, and I just had this sinking feeling. I was completely filled with fear. And I just said, God, I want to do it, but I'm too afraid. And all of a sudden, I just had an epiphany, and I had a realization that 4 walls do not make a prison. Prison is something you carry around on the inside, and I had the keys to the kingdom. I could either run like I always did, or I could be willing to surrender my physical freedom for the freedom that you have. So I went down to the robbery department of the police department in Austin the next day. I parked that car a long ways away, and I went up there and I told them who I was. They sent me up to the robbery department, and the guy talked to me, the detective talked to me a minute, and I told him all about my good AA work, try to get a little rapport going here. And he pulled out a VHS tape and stuck it in and played it, and it was a tall, skinny guy with a scraggly beard like I had, and going from till to till. And it was just about 15 seconds long. And the second time he played it, I thought, I'm in such trouble. I wonder what I did with the money. And he turned around and looked at me, and he said, the guy I'm looking for wouldn't walk in here. He said, the guy I'm looking for is out there. He said, we'll find him. He said, but you can get your skinny butt back to AA, and maybe you can do something about the mess you've created. Now get out of here. I said, I'm in AA forever. I'm not afraid to make amends anymore. I'll make yours. I don't care. I joined Alcoholics Anonymous in earnest, and I became willing to straighten up my past to the best of my ability, and it's taken a long time, and I haven't done it perfectly. I'm stumbling in the right direction, but I've had a fantastic life with you guys. Let me see. I want John to understand that we don't talk longer than an hour. In AA, you do understand in AA that you never have to be alone again, unless you talk longer than an hour. Then you could. I wish I could just sit down. If you're new here in Alcoholics Anonymous, welcome to the fastest growing organization in the world. No one wants to join. But if you got what I got, there's no better place in the world to be. I mean, it just, We don't want anything from you. We just want you to have the life that we have. And all you got to do is give up the life you have to have it. And it should be easy, but it's a hard choice to make. To go on to blotting out your intolerable existence or pick up a simple kit of spiritual tools, it's not an easy choice to make when you're on that side of that choice. We laugh about it once we've made that choice. And why did I make that choice? Because at one time I reached such a bottom, and I was so full of fear and so out of game that I had nowhere to go, and I knew that the higher power that I'd been using for years wasn't going to do it for me anymore. And that's when the magic happened. And just, John Henry showed up, and y'all introduced me to a God of my understanding. I've had a host of friends, and I've made a ton of mistakes, and I've made a ton of things. I didn't have a career, I didn't really pull it together for that. So I'm 4 years sober, and I don't really know what to do with myself. And I discovered this niche that I thought was really cool. You had to do what I do. You had to be a jack of all trades. You had to do a little of this, a little of this, a little of this. And that's what I'm good at. I do a little of this. I do a little of this. Master of nothing, jack of all trades. And I became a building automation man, and I really got into it. And I've been at it now for 38 years, and I just sold the business. And it's just like, how does that happen? I was in Austin. Or Dallas. I was in Dallas, and we were building a big building. It was clean rooms, and they had 200 or 300 men working there, and 50 of them worked for me. And I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of engineers, and everybody's got degrees, and they're sharp, and they're wanting to know. They're looking at me and asking me, how are we going to pull this together to get this to happen? And I'm thinking, do you have any idea what I did to get here? I tore it up. And they stood up and met drunks. And they said, quit being what you are and start being what you could be. Walk in this direction. It's monkey see, monkey do. And but you got to get a good monkey. You got to get a monkey that's got some bananas and he's doing okay. Don't get that little skinny one that's chasing the girls. That's, I've made that mistake, And I've learned that. I've got heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've known people that I don't even know how I got to meet Chuck Chamberlain. I've met Clancy many times. I've met people that are in this room. There's a lot of people in this room who I quote and I think about and I emulate, whether you know it or not. I listen to you talk and I watch how you live, and I think that's the way I'm going. I have something. I have a direction. I'm stumbling in the right direction. You guys know what that's like. And what a wonderful life. I got to start going back into the prisons. And that was a wonderful thing to do. I was a little intimidated by it because I know what that sounds like when you go there and they clang that door shut behind you. But shortly after I started doing that, my life took on a new meaning. And I got to start to meet guys coming out of there, that they were coming out of there and they were looking for AA because we took AA into them. And they came out looking for AA with us. And they're fine members of AA. I still like to get married. I obviously have not solved that problem yet. But I live in a big house in Spring, Texas. I've got this wonderful life. I do. And some days I just can't get over it. I look around and I think, how did you wind up like this? So I'm going to tell you about my dad before I sit down. My dad, I tried to make amends to him when I was 6, 7 months sober. And he said, that's fine, kid. Glad you're sober. Let's get on with life. But there was this gulf between us, and I would come to you and I'd say, I've been trying to get this right and it ain't happening. But what do I do? And you said, you continue to be a good son. You continue to be a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And remember, your dad and mother have quit raising you. You're going to be self-supporting through your own contributions. You get a job, and as Bob Bazans would say, go to work, stay at work, work at work. And I adopted those attitudes, and I would show up at family meetings, and I would be cordial even if no one was cordial back. I would do what you told me to do. I was 20 years sober, and I had gone back to Midland, and I was staying at my mother and dad's house. I went to a meeting. I came back from that meeting, and as I walked in, I saw my dad in bed. My mom was waiting up on me like she always does. And I saw my dad in bed back there in his little room, and He wasn't this big, strong guy anymore. Time had kind of worn him down. And I looked back there and I said, is he asleep? And she said, he's just pretending to be. And I walked back into his room to say goodnight, and on an impulse, I leaned down and I kissed him on his old bald head. And before I could pull away, he reached up and pulled my head to his bare chest, and he patted my head. And he said, I didn't know what to do, boy. Me neither. And he said, those people in AA said, I hope you'll always remember to tell them how much we appreciate what you've done for our family, what they've done for you. And I said, I always do, Pop. I always do. We became great friends. And, you know, he was hard to hear, and he hated to talk on the phone. I'd call him. I knew we were tight because he'd answer the phone. He hated the phone. And he'd say, here's your mother. He was a champion Wii bowler at the retirement center, you know, and he got me my own remote, so when I'd come, we'd bowl. And life was good. I got a call, my brother called and said, if you want to see your dad alive, you better come. I said, I can't. It's too painful. And the guy in AA said, he came up, he said, you just go get on the plane and you go up there and call when you get there. And I did. And I followed your direction, and I went up to that hospital, and I was with my dad, and you guys were out in the hallway. You guys were there for, you know, when it became too real. When my dad taking his last breath, my brother, my mother, and I were standing right around him. And he lay back, and his eyes just rolled back, got glassy, and his jaw went slack, and I saw that last breath. And I looked at my mom, was right there, and they'd been together since she was 13. And I looked at him, and I said, Mom, he's gone. And she looked at him, and she said, Dan, what are you staring at? And all of a sudden, his eyes clicked forward, and he raised up a little bit, and he looked at her, and he said, I see a dove. And he lay back and died. I don't know whether that was a hallucination or a spiritual something, but it gave me great peace. And I was so glad that I was there, that my dad knew that his wife and his brothers, my brothers, were going to be okay. That I could stand in the gap. And I have, just because of you. Because you stood me up and stand behind me, I can stand and deliver. And I do. My mom died, and my mom lived in another city, and I couldn't make it, but I called her every day at 10 o'clock, every day. And when I came to her funeral, they had in that retirement center, all of her little friends were there. And we were all right there, and I walked in, and one of these little old ladies, two of them came up to me, she said, you're the one. And she said, you're the one who called every day. I said, yeah. She said, she used to shoo us all out of the room. She said, that's my boy. If you don't get anything else out of Alcoholics Anonymous than that kind of healing, and that relationships with people, with your family, that the ability to sit and be at perfect peace alone, not to be, I got to go. You just sit down and you can have a cup of coffee and look out on your backyard and pet your dogs, answer the phone, open the mail. What a great gift. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm awfully emotional, and I don't know why. Maybe I've had a heart attack. I will tell you this, since y'all like crazy stories. I married a woman that's much younger than me, and the night we were getting married, I had a heart attack. I know. It wasn't what you think. You guys are all like that, every one of you. I was having it when we were getting married, and she was a hospice nurse. You know, that's how we met. You know, she told me, she said, man, I've had a crush on you for a long time. And I said, really? I said, do you know how old I am? And I told her, and she looked at me and she said, I don't care. I said, what do you do? She said, I'm a hospice nurse. I said, I'm going to need one of those. And so we got married, and immediately I went to the hospital. And anyway, and that was my latest fiasco. Turns out there is, 40 years difference is quite a bit. When you go to bed at 7 every night, everybody, they still living. So, no. Listen, I'm so happy that I don't live with lots of secrets nor lots of shame for mistakes I make or for foolishness that most people would look at and say, how could you look yourself in the mirror? I'll tell you how I look myself in the mirror, because I look myself in the mirror, I see me, and I know that the things that are tripping me up now are things that are not always going to be with me, that you guys are slowly guiding me through that. I think sometimes this is the end, this is as far as I go, but there's no end to it. We're peeling that onion, and we just keep getting better, and we keep getting better. We keep stumbling forward. I love you guys. Thank you for letting me share, and I hope you have a great weekend. God bless.